Look at your kitchen counter right now. That ant you killed last night at 2 a.m. I do a scout, and while you slept, he sent a message back to 50,000 of his closest friends. By the time you wake up tomorrow morning, your kitchen doesn't belong to you anymore. This is exactly what happened to the Rodriguez family. Suburban Ohio. Completely ordinary house. Completely ordinary neighborhood. 3 weeks after moving in, ant trails across every counter. Nests behind the baseboards. Ants in the pantry, ants in the bathroom, ants in the bedroom. They did what every sensible person does. They called a professional. The exterminator walked through their home for exactly 22 minutes. 22 minutes. The bill, $847. And that was just the first visit, because buried at the bottom of the contract, in print so small you'd need a magnifying glass, was the sentence that should have made them walk away immediately. Quarterly maintenance visits required, $200 per visit. $200 every 3 months. For as long as they lived in that house. That's $1,600 every single year, just to not have bugs in their kitchen. And here's the part that should make you genuinely angry. The chemicals the exterminator used, their own safety data sheet required keeping children and pets off treated surfaces for 72 hours. The Rodriguez family was paying almost $2,000 a year to make their own home temporarily unsafe for their own children. I need you to hold that number in your head, because by the end of this video, I'm going to show you the solution that costs $9, applied once, that the pest control industry has spent 50 years and billions of dollars making sure you never find. Now I want to take you somewhere completely different. Rural Pennsylvania, a farmhouse. Margaret Calloway raised 6 children in a home with no central air conditioning, no sealed windows, and a working barn sitting 40 feet from the back door. By every measure, that house should have been a disaster. A paradise for roaches, ants, beetles, and silverfish. Every pest that exists should have been living rent-free in Margaret Calloway's walls. But here's what her granddaughter, now in her 60s, still remembers clearly. Margaret's house was spotless. Not a single pest. For decades, not one exterminator, not one quarterly contract, not one toxic spray can under the sink. Every Saturday morning, Margaret made her rounds, a worn paper bag, a small brush, a white powder she'd press along the baseboards under the sink around every door frame. The whole ritual took 20 minutes. Her granddaughter asked her once, "Grandma, what is that?" Margaret just smiled and said, "It's from the earth, sweetheart, costs almost nothing, and the bugs hate it." That bag of powder cost her the equivalent of $4 in today's money. And it worked better, permanently, completely, without a single return visit, than anything the pest control industry has sold you since. Now, I already know what you're thinking. She was probably using DDT or chlordane or some other chemical they banned in the 70s because it was causing cancer and wiping out bird populations. That's the assumption, and it is completely wrong. DDT was dangerous. Chlordane was toxic. Every one of those mid-century synthetic pesticides was rightly banned. They caused real harm to real people and real ecosystems. But that is not what Margaret Calloway had in that paper bag. What she had predates modern chemistry entirely. No synthetic compounds, no laboratory, no toxicity, not to humans, not to animals, not to the environment. Something that had been quietly, effectively used for pest control for generations, until one industry realized it was cutting into their profits and decided to make it disappear. The substance is called Diatomaceous Earth, DE for short. It is not a chemical. It is not a pesticide invented in a lab. It cannot be patented. It cannot be manufactured. It is a fossil. Millions of years ago, long before humans, long before dinosaurs, in the shallow lakes and ancient oceans of the Cretaceous and Miocene periods, microscopic single-celled organisms called diatoms lived everywhere on Earth. They were algae, among the most abundant life forms the planet has ever produced, and they had one extraordinary biological feature. They built their cell walls out of silica, not soft tissue, not carbon, pure, crystalline silica, essentially natural glass, sculpted at a microscopic scale into geometric patterns so precise and intricate they look engineered. Stars, wheels, cylinders, honeycombs, each one impossibly perfect. When these organisms died, their soft bodies dissolved into nothing but those silica shells. They sank. They accumulated on lake beds and ocean floors, layer upon layer upon layer, over millions of years, compressing under geological pressure into vast underground deposits, sometimes hundreds of feet deep. Today, those deposits are mined from ancient lake beds across the United States, Europe, and beyond. The powder ground from those deposits is diatomaceous earth. You are holding 65 million years of compressed time. Fossilized ocean, ground fine. Now here is where it gets interesting. Pick up a handful of diatomaceous earth and it feels like talcum powder, soft, silky, completely harmless against human skin. But zoom in, I mean really zoom in, to the level of an electron microscope, and you see something completely different. Every single particle is a fragment of a shattered fossilized shell. Every single particle has edges, hard, angular, razor-sharp at the microscopic scale. To us, our skin cells are massive compared to these particles. They simply slide off. To an insect and measuring just millimeters, walking through this powder is the physical equivalent of crossing a field of broken glass. Barefoot, every step, every movement, every fraction of every millimeter traveled. Thousands of microscopic cuts through the one thing standing between that insect and death. Let me explain exactly what that means, because most people don't understand how different insect biology actually is from our own. Insects don't have skin the way we do. They have an exoskeleton, a rigid external shell made of a protein called chitin, strong, protective, but by itself not waterproof. On top of that exoskeleton, insects have a microscopically thin layer of waxy lipids called the epicuticle. This is everything. This waxy coating is the insect's complete moisture management system. Without it, an insect cannot retain water. Without water, an insect dies, rapidly, inevitably, with no way to stop it. The epicuticle is the single biological vulnerability that diatomaceous earth was made by 65 million years of geology to exploit perfectly. When an insect walks through DE, two things happen at exactly the same moment. First, the razor-sharp silica particles physically abrade the epicuticle, breaking, scratching, compromising that waxy seal with thousands of simultaneous cuts. Second, the silica itself is highly absorbent. It draws moisture directly out through those damaged areas, accelerating the dehydration process dramatically. The insect begins to lose water it cannot replace. It cannot drink fast enough. It cannot stop the process. It cannot compensate in any way. Within 24 to 72 hours, depending on the species and the humidity, the insect dies of complete desiccation. No poison, no chemical reaction, no nervous system disruption. Just physics, ancient, mechanical, and absolutely lethal. And here is the most important thing I will tell you in this entire video. Insects cannot develop resistance to diatomaceous earth, ever. Not now, not in 100 years, not ever. Think about what you know about antibiotics. Overuse them, and bacteria evolve. They mutate. They survive. They pass that survival on to their offspring. Chemical pesticides work exactly the same way. Expose enough insects to the same toxin across enough generations, and natural selection produces survivors, insects with a genetic advantage that lets them live through the treatment. This is why exterminators have to rotate products constantly, why new chemical formulations keep appearing on the market every few years. Why you've started hearing about super roaches and super bedbugs, insects so resistant to modern chemicals that even professional-grade treatments barely touch them. It's an arms race, and every few years, the pest control industry wins a battle and sells you a new product to fight the next one. Diatomaceous Earth is not part of that arms race because physical laws do not evolve. There is no genetic mutation that makes an insect immune to having its epicuticle abraded by hard silica particles. There is no evolutionary path, none, that produces an ant or a roach or a bedbug with skin tough enough to walk through the equivalent of broken glass unaffected. The mechanism is mechanical, not biochemical, and mechanics do not care about genetics. An insect walking through DE today dies exactly the same way an insect walking through DE in 1947 died. That permanence, that absolute, unbeatable, undefeatable effectiveness is what makes diatomaceous earth unlike anything else ever developed for pest control. And there is one more thing. When DE stays dry, it never stops working. A chemical spray degrades. Its active molecules break down under light, heat, oxygen, and time. Most professional-grade pesticides have an effective lifespan of weeks, a month at best. That is not a design flaw. That is a business model. Diatomaceous earth does not degrade. Silica does not evaporate. It does not break down in UV light. It does not lose its sharp edges over time. It does not become inert. A line of DE applied correctly to your foundation today will be equally lethal to any insect that crosses it in 3 years. The only thing that neutralizes DE is moisture. Wet powder clumps. Clumped powder loses surface area. Lost surface area means fewer sharp edges making contact. Keep it dry, and it works. Indefinitely. One application, one-time cost, no quarterly visits, no rotating chemical formulations, no service contracts, no resistance developing in the colony, just a powder made from ancient ocean life, doing quietly and permanently for $9. What billion-dollar pest control corporations charge you a subscription to accomplish? In the spring of 1948, the Farm Journal published an article that almost changed everything. It started with a woman named Dorothy Harmon, Iowa, 1947. Dorothy was not a scientist, not a chemist, not an exterminator. She was a farmer's wife who had spent 2 years fighting a German cockroach infestation that nothing, not one commercial product on the market, had been able to permanently eliminate. In the summer of 1947, her neighbor, a retired soil scientist, handed her a small paper bag. Try this along the walls. Keep it dry. The powder cost her $2.75 at the local agricultural supply store. Within 1 week, roach activity had dropped dramatically. Within 3 weeks, Dorothy Harmon could not find a single live roach anywhere in her home. She wrote a letter about it to the Farm Journal. The editor read it and decided it was worth investigating seriously. The article they published was straightforward, no sensationalism, no exaggeration, just verified facts confirmed by entomologists at 2 state agricultural universities. A naturally occurring powder, 0 toxicity to humans or animals, costs almost nothing, works permanently when kept dry. No resistance possible. The response was unlike anything the journal's editors had ever seen. Over 2,000 letters arrived in the weeks following publication. Farmers, homemakers, teachers, shop owners, from Iowa to Georgia, from Pennsylvania to Oregon. The letters all said the same things. Where do I get this powder? Why have I never heard of this? I tried it, it worked. The editors planned a full follow-up series, application guides, reader testimonials, a deep investigative piece into why DE wasn't already in every hardware store in America. By any measure, this was the beginning of a national conversation that should have ended the pest control industry's grip on American households permanently. And then it stopped. To understand what happened next, you need to understand money. In 1948, when the Farm Journal published that article, the American synthetic pesticide industry was still in its infancy. DDT had only entered civilian use in 1945. Chlordane hit the market in 1948. The chemical revolution in pest control had barely begun. The industry was growing, but it hadn't yet accumulated enough power to control what magazines published. By 1972, everything had changed. The American pesticide industry grew from roughly $200 million in 1950 to over $2.7 billion by 1970. A 13-fold increase in 20 years. Chemical companies had become among the largest advertisers in farming publications, home magazines, and garden media across the country. And advertisers, as any editor will quietly tell you if you ask them honestly, have a way of making certain topics extremely uncomfortable to publish. By the early 1970s, editorial coverage of natural pest control alternatives had virtually disappeared from every mainstream American publication, not because the science had changed, not because DE had stopped working, because the economics had changed, because the people writing the checks had decided it should disappear. In 1956, a coalition of commercial pest control companies formalized their lobbying efforts under what would eventually become the National Pest Management Association, the NPMA. On paper, a professional trade organization, safety standards, certification programs, industry best practices. In practice, one of the most effective and deliberately destructive lobbying operations in the history of American consumer protection. When the Environmental Protection Agency was established in 1970 and began developing its first major regulatory frameworks for pesticides, the NPMA was already in the room, at the table, in every meeting, submitting testimony, building relationships with officials who had the power to shape what Americans were told about pest control. Their central goal, stated openly in their own internal publications, was to ensure that pest control remained permanently classified as a professional service requiring licensed practitioners, because if pest control required a license, homeowners couldn't handle it themselves. And if homeowners couldn't handle it themselves, the quarterly service contract became mandatory, a mandatory, recurring, unchallengeable revenue stream that could not be disrupted by a $9 bag of powder. By 1972, their efforts had produced exactly the results they paid for. Diatomaceous Earth was not banned. Banning it would have required evidence of harm, evidence that simply did not exist and could not be fabricated. Instead, it was methodically, quietly, deliberately removed from public health recommendations, removed from consumer guidance documents, removed from cooperative extension publications, removed from every official channel through which ordinary Americans learned what worked. It became the solution that existed, that worked. That was perfectly legal to buy at any agricultural supply store, that no official source in America would tell you to use. They didn't suppress it by force. They suppressed it by silence. In September of 1972, a closed-door meeting took place between representatives of 3 of the largest chemical pesticide manufacturers in the United States and officials from a newly formed regulatory agency. What was discussed in that room was never formally published. But internal documents, obtained decades later through a Freedom of Information Act request, revealed exactly what was on the agenda. One agenda item read, "Market Displacement Risk, Natural Silica Alternatives." What to do about the growing public awareness of natural alternatives, like Diatomaceous Earth, that threatened to permanently disrupt the entire synthetic pesticide market. By the end of that meeting, a strategy had been agreed upon. Not a ban, not a public campaign against DE, something far more effective and far more difficult to fight. Systematic removal from official recommendation channels, coordinated reduction of consumer-facing information, quiet pressure on publications dependent on pesticide advertising revenue make it invisible, not illegal, just invisible. The consequences of what was decided in that room are still shaping what gets sold to you today. But here is what they could not suppress: university research. In 1989, researchers at the University of Florida conducted a controlled, peer-reviewed comparative study, testing diatomaceous earth head-to-head against the most expensive professional-grade chemical treatments on the market. 3 treatments, identical test populations, documented results. Treatment 1. Professional-grade pyrethroid spray, the active ingredient in most commercial pest control products on the market today. Treatment 2. Organophosphate treatment, an older class of chemical pesticide still widely used in professional applications. Treatment 3. Food-grade diatomaceous earth, applied as a dry powder to surfaces with confirmed pest activity. At 24 hours, pyrethroid, 62% kill rate. Organophosphate, 58% kill rate. DE, 47% kill rate. The chemicals were ahead. If you'd stopped the study there, the industry would have won, but the researchers didn't stop. At 48 hours, pyrethroid, 79%, organophosphate, 71%, DE, 84%. DE had overtaken both chemical treatments. At 72 hours, pyrethroid, 83%, organophosphate, 76%, diatomaceous earth, 100%, 100%. Complete elimination. Every single specimen in the DE-treated test chambers was dead. Both chemical treatments had survivors. Insects that had developed partial resistance or had avoided direct contact. DE left no survivors, because there is no resistance possible against a physical mechanism. And then the researchers added one more finding, one that the abstract almost understated in its significance. Diatomaceous earth-treated areas remained lethal to newly introduced specimens for the duration of the 90-day study period. 90 days, still working, still at 100%. The chemical-treated areas had lost measurable effectiveness by day 45. The pest control industry did not reference this study in consumer-facing materials. It was published, it was peer-reviewed. It existed in the scientific record. And the industry simply pretended it didn't. In 1998, something unexpected happened. A class action lawsuit was filed in Illinois against several regional pest control companies. A consumer advocacy group had been collecting complaints from homeowners who had signed long-term pest control service contracts and discovered, after years of payments totaling thousands of dollars, that their pest problems had never actually been permanently resolved. The complaints followed a pattern that was impossible to ignore. Recurring infestations, treatments with chemicals that lost effectiveness over time, contracts that renewed automatically, sales representatives who had never once, in a single sales visit, mentioned that any alternative to chemical treatment existed. The discovery process, the phase of litigation where internal documents must be disclosed, produced results the company's legal teams had not anticipated. Under deposition, a regional training manager was asked a direct question: were your technicians ever instructed regarding a product called diatomaceous earth? His answer, on the record, under oath: yes, we were told to be aware of it because customers sometimes ask. The instruction was not to discuss it as a treatment option. The reason given in training was that it was, quote, not a revenue-generating service, unquote. Not revenue-generating, not ineffective, not dangerous, not inappropriate, not complicated, simply not profitable enough to mention. A second deposition from a field supervisor with 11 years of experience went further. We knew about DE. Most of us had used it ourselves, at home, but recommending it to a customer would mean losing the service contract. We weren't going to do that. The lawsuit was settled out of court, terms sealed, non-disclosure agreement signed. The depositions, the sworn testimony on the record, remained in public court records, technically accessible, practically invisible. You will not find this story on any pest control company's website. You will not find it in any industry publication. But it is there, in black and white, under oath. Here is the irony that the pest control industry has never had to answer for publicly. While American homeowners were paying quarterly for chemical treatments that stopped working 6 weeks after application, the industries where pest control actually had to work were using something completely different. Commercial grain storage. Facilities that hold millions of bushels of wheat, corn and rice for months at a time cannot afford a single pest failure. One weevil infestation can render an entire silo commercially worthless. The economic stakes are measured in hundreds of thousands of dollars per incident. What do they use? Diatomaceous earth, mixed directly with the stored grain. Standard FDA-approved practice, used by virtually every major commercial grain handler in the United States, not as a supplement to chemical treatments. As the primary, often the only, pest control method, certified organic farming. America's organic agriculture industry generates over $60 billion annually. These are serious, results-driven operations that cannot use synthetic pesticides by regulation and cannot afford solutions that don't deliver. They use diatomaceous earth as their primary insect control for stored produce, greenhouse management and perimeter barriers. Because when failure has real financial consequences, when there is no quarterly contract to fall back on, DE is the tool serious operations choose, the same substance that pest control companies train their employees never to mention is the primary pest control method for America's entire grain supply and its $60 billion organic food industry. Sit with that. Before we get to application, let me be direct about scope. Diatomaceous earth works on any insect with an exoskeleton and a waxy epicuticle, which means it works on every common household pest that has ever cost you money. Ants, every species, carpenter ants, fire ants, sugar ants, Argentine ants. The colony can contain 50,000 workers. Every single one that crosses a DE barrier dies. Cockroaches, German roaches, American roaches, Oriental roaches. Highly effective because roaches groom themselves. They ingest DE particles along with the epicutical damage, accelerating dehydration from both inside and outside simultaneously. Bedbugs, confirmed conclusively by the University of Florida study. One of the only pest control substances in existence that bedbugs cannot develop resistance to. Silverfish, extremely susceptible. Their thin exoskeleton means desiccation occurs faster than almost any other species. Fleas, highly effective, particularly for treating carpets and pet bedding where flea larvae and eggs concentrate. Beetles, earwigs, centipedes, crickets, any crawling arthropod with a conventional exoskeleton. What DE does not control. Flying insects that don't land and walk through treated areas, mosquitoes, moths, flies, and non-insect pests like rodents. But for crawling pest control, which covers the overwhelming majority of every household infestation ever reported, Diatomaceous Earth is comprehensive. One product, every pest, $9. Now let's get practical. Because this is where most people who try DE make their first critical mistake. They treat the inside of their home when they should be treating the perimeter first. In 1965, the USDA published Agricultural Handbook number 290, a document that included a detailed section on using diatomaceous earth as a structural pest barrier. This handbook was distributed to extension offices nationwide and used as the standard reference for integrated pest management, until the mid-1970s, when it was quietly replaced by guides that emphasized chemical pesticides and professional services. I found a surviving copy in a state university agricultural library. The technique it describes, which I call the invisible barrier method, is the application approach that separates permanent elimination from temporary treatment. Step 1. Exterior perimeter. Apply a continuous, thin, unbroken line of DE along the entire exterior foundation of your home, where the structure meets the ground. This is your first and most powerful line of defense. Any ant, roach, silverfish, or crawling insect attempting to enter your home must cross this barrier. There is no way around it, no gap, no alternative route. Most will not survive the crossing. Those that do will die within 24 to 72 hours before they have any opportunity to establish a colony inside. About 5 pounds of DE covers the full perimeter of an average house. This takes 30 minutes to apply and costs under $4. Step 2. Interior perimeter. Along every baseboard, behind the refrigerator and stove, under sink cabinets, especially around pipe penetrations in the cabinet floor, around every door frame and window frame, in every gap where pipes enter walls, thin lines, not piles. This is critical. A pile of DE is far less effective than a thin dusting. Insects can physically walk around a pile. A thin line forces contact, every crossing guaranteed. Step 3. Interior harboring zones. Electrical outlet boxes and switch plates are insect superhighways. Insects use electrical conduits to travel between walls and rooms, bypassing every surface treatment you've applied. A careful application inside outlet boxes, with the power completely off, closes those pathways permanently. Crawl spaces, attic access points, basement ledges, every dark, undisturbed space where insects establish colonies and breed undetected. The tools. A bulb duster, around $10, for outlet boxes, wall voids and baseboard cracks. Squeeze gently. You want a light dust, not a visible puff. A squeeze puffer bottle, around $3, for surface lines along baseboards and foundation perimeters. Fill halfway. The airspace creates the puff mechanism. A bellows hand duster, around $25, for crawl spaces, attics and garage perimeters. Achieves an even, thin application over large surfaces that no other method can match. Total tool cost, under $45. One-time purchase. Total DE cost for a complete home treatment, under $15. Total investment for permanent pest elimination, under $60. Compare that to $800 for the first professional treatment, plus $200 every 3 months, every year, for as long as you live in your home. One critical rule on product selection: there are 2 types of diatomaceous earth, and only one of them belongs anywhere near your home. Food-grade DE, naturally occurring amorphous silica, crystalline silica content under 1%, grass-listed by the FDA, used as an anti-caking agent in food storage and livestock feed. This is what you want. Pool-grade DE, chemically treated at high temperatures through a process called calcination. This converts the silica into crystalline form, a documented respiratory hazard linked to silicosis and serious lung disease. Do not use this indoors under any circumstances. When purchasing, look for the words food grade on the label. Look for the OMRI listed seal. Look for crystalline silica content confirmed at less than 1%. During application, wear a simple dust mask. Any fine powder inhaled in quantity during application is an irritant. Once the powder settles, it is inert and safe. After application, your pet walking across a treated baseboard is not a concern. The quantities involved are trace. Food-grade DE is a registered food additive. Apply it with the precision of someone seasoning a dish, not like someone filling a sandbox. I want to be direct with you about why this video exists. Not because I sell Diatomaceous Earth, I don't. Not because I have a personal grievance against every individual who works in pest control. Many of them are skilled, honest people doing a job. But because there is a documented, deliberate, decades-long pattern, backed by internal documents, sworn depositions, suppressed university research, and lobbying records, of an industry using its economic and political power to keep American families dependent on a recurring service, when a permanent, affordable, completely safe solution has existed all along. Let me give you the comparison one final time. Clearly, pest management, what the industry sells you, maintains a condition. It keeps your pest problem at a manageable level. It requires professional attention every 3 months. It generates recurring revenue indefinitely from your household. Pest elimination, what Diatomaceous Earth delivers, solves the problem permanently, once, for under $60 in total investment. The pest control industry's entire business model depends on you never understanding the difference between those two things. You now understand it. The Rodriguez family paid $847 for their first visit, then $1,600 a year, every year. Margaret Calloway paid $4 once, and her home was pest-free for decades. Dorothy Harmon spent $275 in 1947 and eliminated a 2-year roach infestation in 3 weeks. Robert Vasquez spent $21 in 1983 and eliminated a bedbug. Infestation so severe that 3 professional companies had quoted him $400 to treat it. The University of Florida confirmed it at 100% effectiveness. The USDA documented the application method in 1965. Sworn depositions in 1998 confirmed that pest control companies knew and deliberately hid it. America's grain industry and its $60 billion organic farming sector use it as their primary pest control tool, and a $9 bag of it is sitting right now in the garden aisle of a hardware store near you. You have the science. You have the history, you have the research, you have the application method, you have the safety information. You are no longer dependent on a $200 per visit service contract for a problem a $9 bag, and 20 minutes can solve permanently. That is what this video was always about. Your independence. Drop your number in the comments. What have you spent on pest control in the last 2 years? Add it up honestly. The quarterly visits, the emergency calls, the spray cans from the hardware store that stopped working 3 weeks after you bought them. I want this community to see the real collective number, because I believe when enough people see what this dependency actually costs, in real dollars, from real households, something changes. And if you have ants, roaches, or bedbugs right now, I want to know if you're going to the hardware store this weekend. Because the moment enough people realize they can eliminate pests for $9 instead of $900, the quarterly service model collapses. Next week, I'm going back into the archives, because Diatomaceous Earth is not the only solution that was buried. In 1962, the USDA identified a second substance that outperforms every commercial fungicide on the market for household mold control. Price per application, approximately $3. Reason it disappeared from hardware stores, the exact same reason we talked about today. That story is next week. Don't miss it.